my father, went to the First Mennonite Church where N.B. Grubb was a pastor. When my father was ordained as a minister in 1923, I believe, N.B. Grubb performed the ordination. The ministers of the Eastern District Conference came here on a Sunday morning and had a service about 8 or 8:30 before their regular church service. And I know my father took his term with all the other ministers early on a Sunday morning. I'm a member, and was a member at that time, of the West Swamp Mennonite Church, which is a member of the Eastern District Conference, which was one of the sponsoring organizations for Frederick. Also, back in the late 50s, my father, who was pastor at West Swamp Mennonite Church, was a board member, and at that time they were working on the wing, the Magnolia wing, and with our church being involved regularly, I knew about Frederick. One of the things that occurred annually was that most of the churches in the Eastern District Conference had a Harvest Home Sunday, and people brought in canned fruits and vegetables, fresh fruit and vegetables, and then they were donated to Frederick, and Frederick used them to feed the residents. Another big event was Anniversary Day, when practically all the churches in the Eastern District Conference got together and put on this big day, and it was a celebration of the anniversary of Frederick, and it was also a fundraising day. They served a big meal, which people paid for, a beef dinner. In addition to the dinner, they had a speaker, and then they had a dishpan offering. Instead of passing an offering plate, they passed a dishpan. And the idea was to get the dishpan full by the time it was passed by everybody. But it was generally a very successful day. The other thing that they had that would not be acceptable today, they had a room for the smokers. The smoking wasn't permitted anywhere in the building other than in that room. And the men who wanted to smoke had to go into that room and smoke. So if you opened the door, it was kind of blue in there. I think when I came on the board, the first one I think was around 1970, 1971. There and about the time that the board and the staff and the administrator here were planning for the nursing wing to be built. They had an area which is now in the southern part of the building where Magnolia is, called the infirmary. So people that got sick went to the infirmary if they didn't go to the hospital or stay in their room. So I think it was a pretty well a foregone conclusion that the nursing, skilled nursing was needed, plus probably the times of other retirement communities were having nursing facilities, and it was necessary to make it something that we could keep up with the state-of-the-art in the retirement home community. I remember looking at architectural plans, engineering plans that we discussed, and particularly the cost. But I can't recall the costs of the nursing wing other than that we were glad to get the $1 million, maybe a little more than $1 million from the federal grant, which was arranged through Richard Hostetler, the chairman, and the congressman from the Bethlehem area. The board of directors met in the dining room. At the same time, the Women's Auxiliary had a meeting. The one thing that would never go over today is at the end of the board meeting, they had served the board members with a dessert that had been prepared by the dining staff at Frederick. It was always delicious pie or cake or something. We all looked forward to that. But it was served by the Women's Auxiliary. There was some building done in the front I think that's when that new boardroom was built. And at that time, one of the discussions was whether we should keep the pillars, because with the new addition to the front, the pillars were not needed for any kind of structural support. And the pillars were kind of a trademark of Frederick, an identifiable thing that people could say, well, Frederick, that's the place with the pillars. So the board somewhat reluctantly agreed to keep the pillars. I think the cost was about $80,000 to keep the pillars. But I think they've become a real trademark for Frederick to identify where Frederick is and where the front entrance is.